Hello everyone, and welcome back to a list that is, quite frankly, a bit deadly, if you will. Yes, we have in fact done a list on villains who killed the most before, but quite frankly, the evil people at Star Trek just kept creating them, didn't they? We can't really complain, it gives us a chance to do a second list. I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are 10 more Star Trek villains who killed the most. Number 10, Kor. Perhaps a controversial inclusion here, but one must remember that Klingons are, by and large, a warrior race. Kor's introduction in Errand of Mercy depicts him as a brutal overseer and tyrant. This was in keeping with the description of Klingon as a whole. It was only in Deep Space Nine's Blood Oath came around that the audience saw the softer side of John Colicos' betrayal. Kor arrives as a subjugator on Organia, bringing with him 500 of his troops. Unbeknownst to him is that both Kirk and Spock are on the planet posing as traitors, who proceed to wage a guerrilla war against the occupiers.
Kor, in response to this, seemingly has 200 Organians put to death.
Here's where the controversy arises. Technically, Kor only gave the order, but even more than this, no one actually died. So, what the heck is Kor doing on this list then? Well, the simple fact is this: the Klingon Empire was one of the most brutal organizations of the 23rd and 24th centuries. Kor, in being the first Klingon that the audience met on screen, ordering a mass execution no less, becomes a figurehead of this organization. At least he died saving lives, so there was some hero points for that. Number 9, Redjack. Redjack appears in the original series episode Wolf in the Fold. A non-corporeal entity, it travels from planet to planet via possession, committing murders for the simple pleasure of killing. It was during its tenure on Argelius II that it met its supposed downfall. Redjack is an outlier on this list, as it's not known for certain how many people it had killed. It was clearly hundreds of years old, as it was revealed to have been the infamous serial killer Jack the Ripper in the past. Travelling from planet to planet, it was responsible for murdering many women. Spock suggested this was because it enjoyed their fear more than the fear of men. The episode saw Redjack take control of the Enterprise, though it was then forced back into Hengist's body and was beamed into space. The expanded universe showed that it was not the end of this monster, as it latched onto another ship to survive, going dormant for a century before returning, this time to do battle with the Enterprise D. It also appeared in the two-part comic Wolf on the Prowl and Wolf at the Door, where it was finally defeated. Number 8, Krell Mett. Krell Mett was introduced in the episode Nothing Human. He was a Cardassian scientist appearing on the USS Voyager in the form of a hologram, created to assist the EMH. His affable, charming manner belied a dreadful secret. Mett was to the Bajorans what Mengele was to the Jews, a monster through and through. Mett had done most of his research during the occupation, using Bajoran slaves as his own private test subjects. He conducted inhumane experiments, killing thousands in the pursuit of, as he sought, scientific advancement. Though the outcome of his research allowed the EMH to save both Torres and an alien parasite that had attached itself to her, the cost of this knowledge was simply too high. The former Maquis members of the crew would have nothing to do with this hologram, and the EMH's own conscience couldn't allow for the continued use of this research, knowing how it had been achieved. Mett, who was very probably still alive in the Alpha Quadrant at this point, received a small form of just desserts when his research, and the hologram used to embody it, was deleted from the ship's database. Number 7, V'ger. Another example of accidental, yet highly destructive power here, V'ger was encountered by the newly refitted USS Enterprise in the 2270s. Massive beyond anything that Starfleet had encountered before, it dwarfed not only the ship, and the cloud that surrounded the main structure was said to be greater than the Earth's entire orbit around the Sun. V'ger had displayed its power by destroying 3 Klingon Katinga-class vessels, Starfleet Station Epsilon 9, and, tragically, Lieutenant Ilea as well. Perhaps destroying may be a little inaccurate though, as all of these were examples of V'ger downloading, storing, and remembering each of them instead. Spock, fascinated by this new encounter, underwent a spacewalk that took him into the heart of V'ger's core. There, he discovered the recorded images of thousands of ships, planets, and entire galaxies, all of which it had encountered on its travels. It is unclear if V'ger had downloaded these as it had the Klingons and Ilea, though there is no reason to believe that it hadn't. If that is so, then there is little doubt that V'ger, in its quest to return to its maker, was simply far too efficient at its job, and the devastation that it wrought, despite creating a new form of life, is unparalleled in Star Trek history. Number 6, Jrel. This is another controversial entry, as Jrel is effectively the Oppenheimer of Star Trek. His work allowed the creation of the Metreon Cascade, which in turn led to a devastating attack against the Talaxians. The man came aboard Voyager early into the ship's adventure in the Delta Quadrant, which led to a difficult meeting for Neelix. Neelix himself had suffered from Jrel's work, losing his entire family to the Cascade, though he was off-world thankfully when the device was detonated. Perhaps including Jrel as a villain is too simplistic. Neelix himself was able to, if not entirely forgive the man, then certainly come to an understanding that there was a difference between a despotic maniac and a misguided scientist, one who felt extreme remorse for his actions. It may be best to let history judge men like Jrel. He certainly was aware of the destructive power of his creation, though he personally didn't push the button. Much as Robert Oppenheimer has a complicated place in the history of mankind, so too does Jrel have in the annals of the Delta Quadrant. Number 5. Saen. In our previous list we discussed an entry that raised some eyebrows. Anorax. Did he actually deserve a spot on the rankings, as the giant reset button was hit? Well, we're here to tell you that not only have we not answered that, but we're introducing another entry here just like it. Dr. Tolian Saen was the mad scientist who would sacrifice anything and anyone so that he could return to the Nexus. His research involved the destruction of large stellar bodies, something that would have immediate and deadly results for anyone too close by. While the destruction of the Viridian Star was undone by the efforts of Picard and Kirk, that did nothing for any of the victims of Saen beforehand. Saren's research into trilithium saw him allying with the Duras sisters. This in turn would lead to the deaths of Romulans and Federation citizens, along with the destruction of the sisters' own bird of prey and its crew. This is yet another reason why Picard and Kirk going back to that one bloody moment on the surface of Viridian 3 makes even less sense. If Kirk had simply gone back to the Enterprise B, he could have stopped Saen long before any of it had happened by just pushing him out of an airlock. Number 4. General Nadar. Though the audience never actually heard this name on screen, the notes for Picard's first season identify the half-Vulcan Romulan Commodore O as Nadar, who held the rank of general within the Romulan fleet. As a member of the Zhat Vash, her hands were drenched in blood. It was she who was responsible for reprogramming the synthetics on Mars. Thus, this one individual is responsible for almost 20,000 deaths, and a planet that remained on fire into the early 25th century at least. Nadar's motives may, and that's a big may there, have come from a place of preservation, but that doesn't change the fact that her actions directly led to one of the worst massacres in Federation history. There has been nothing heard from this character since her disappearance after the arrival of Starfleet, though it is safe to say that she is still out there. The immediate threat may have passed, but this soldier infiltrated Starfleet with relative ease. There is no telling what she could do if she really put her mind to it. Number 3. Gul Daril. There are enough atrocities that occurred within the Cardassian occupation of Bajor to fill several of these lists by themselves, but for this entry we look at Gul Daril, the so-called Butcher of Galatep. Galatep labour camp was a grim and brutal destination for any Bajoran slave, analogous with Auschwitz or Dachau, and was well known to be a location full of torture and pain. By the closing days of the occupation, extreme crimes were commonplace, with murder as frequent as anything else. Daril presided over some of the worst atrocities, often ordering his men to go out and, quote, kill Bajoran scum. Eamon Maritza, the poor man struggling with the Cardassians' lack of accountability for their crimes, delivered a chilling monologue as Daril. One could well imagine this man celebrating in the evil that was orchestrated under his watch. The death of Maritza at the hands of a traumatized Bajoran could simply be added to Daril's own tally. Number 2. Khan. Oh, come on, you didn't think we'd forgotten about Khan, did you? Khan Noonien Singh is often the first name out of Trekkies' mouths when asked who the biggest, baddest villain of them all is. He has the dubious honour of being maniacal in several realities, as well as being a cold-blooded tyrant to boot. Khan Prime was a warlord in the original timeline's eugenics wars. For a period he controlled much of Asia, brutally conquering and disposing of those he deemed inferior. At that point, it seemed as though everyone who wasn't genetically engineered was inferior, meaning everyone was on his hit list. When he found himself in the future, brilliant a tactician as he was foiled not once but twice by James T. Kirk. The first time would be a relatively bloodless affair, whereas the second time would see much of the Enterprise's cadet crew, and of course Spock, killed in the attempt to stop him. The Kelvin-era Khan wasn't much better in terms of his goals, even if Spock got to survive in that universe. He was technically responsible for the death of Kirk, but don't worry, that didn't last for very long. Either way, Khan Noonien Singh is still a villain who should send a shiver of fear down the spine of anyone who hears it or is on the receiving end of "as from hell's heart he stabs at thee." Number 1. Gul Dukat. Gul Dukat is, in essence, as close to Adolf Hitler that Star Trek has ever really come to portraying. His hard-boiled hatred for the Bajorans, hidden behind a veneer of trying to help them modernise, continuously showed its ugly head in the years after the occupation came to an end. Dukat's numbers are slightly off-centre. Technically, the numbers of dead started to drop when he took over as Prefect of Bajor, yet, as he would later explain with glee to Weyoun, he tried to avoid killing people when possible. Instead, he wanted to dominate, bend others to his will, and force them to see why they had been wrong to oppose him in the beginning. With his negotiating Cardassia's entry into the Dominion, he then became the author of the deaths of millions, taking the lead in a war that would devastate the Alpha Quadrant for decades to follow. Dukat himself would fall out of favour with his Dominion masters, but this would do nothing to curb his bloodlust. He simply hitched his ride to another post, slinking into the service of the Power Wraiths. Between the actual murders that he himself committed and the deaths that took place under his orders, Dukat was and remains one of the deadliest foes Starfleet ever faced. That's everything for our list today, folks. Thank you so much for watching along. As I say, this is one of 2 lists that we have done like this. If there's anyone you think is missing off this, go and check the other one as well. If there's anything that you would like us to know, let us know in the comments below. And of course, get in touch with us over on socials. We're on Twitter at TrekCulture. We're on Instagram at TrekCultureYT. I'm at Sean Ferrick on the various socials, and we are also on Blue Sky as well. Thank you so much to Martin for making this video look as pretty as it does. Everyone, live long and prosper. Look after yourselves, look after everyone else. The world is continually showing us why it is so important, now more than ever, for us to come together and try and make things better. So, if you can do one thing today, it's reach out and show some kindness. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.